Okay, so we're back. So in the last episode, you installed the AOS and the client. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go check to make sure that it was successfully installed, it's working, and we're going to start going through the checklist of really getting everything compiled, getting all of your kind of config set up for you to start utilizing your system. So let's switch over to the server. Over here, if all went well, you should have a client with the status of successfully installed and your application object server. I don't care about the summary report, so I'm going to untick that and click finish. Okay, so now what's going to happen is AOS would be installed and it's a service. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that that service is actually running. So we push the Windows button and Q to bring up the search functionality. We're just going to type services. Okay, so this one over here, right click that guy, and I'm going to pin it to my taskbar because I'm always in the services to make sure everything's working. And then we're going to open it. So we click on it there. And these are all the Windows services that are running on your server, right? So all sorts of stuff's happening in the background for you. So there you can see there's the Active Directory, which we installed in one of the earlier steps. Now if we scroll down to a bit lower, we're going to look for the Microsoft Dynamics AX Object Server. So that's what the AOS means, is it's AX Object Server, AOS. Okay, and it's running. Cool. So if it's running, it wouldn't start if there's any issues. So common reasons why the AOS server won't start is security issues, so the wrong user account, wrong password, or not being able to connect to the database. Those are, I guess, the two most common reasons. So let's close this up here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to actually open the client for the first time. So let's close this. Now in the previous video, I asked it to put an icon on my desktop. So there's the icon. Let's open that icon now. So, and yeah, you can see we're running Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 R3 CU12 for the very first time. So as you can see, there's a lot of work involved just to get to this point. And there's a lot more work involved, to be perfectly fair. What you're going to see here isn't a working ERP system. It's basically a whole bunch of other steps here to get the code base compiled correctly, to get your opening configuration parameters correct, to add licensing, synchronizing the database. There's a lot of tasks involved here, which are really good to go through because these are tasks that you're going to need to do often for a healthy maintenance of your system. So here we go. Before you begin, this is the initialization checklist. I don't care about lifecycle services. Some of you guys, if you're consultants, you're going to care about that stuff. You want to link your lifecycle services project to this installation. I don't care about that, so I'm going to say that's complete. Customer feedback, I don't care about that. And here we go, the compile. Okay, so what this is doing, I'll give you my kind of explanation. The more technical guys might shout at me because I've probably got it wrong, but this is my interpretation of it. So X++, AX 2012, or actually all versions of AX, are written in a language called X++. So X++ is a language that's, I don't know the exact history. I think it was based upon a variant of a language called X something, and they then, the original designers of AX took it and then kind of came up with X++. And what that means is that language needs to be compiled, right? Okay, so what that means is when you write something in a computer language, the machine doesn't actually understand that yet. It needs to be compiled into a language a bit lower that the machine will understand. So this compilation is going to compile it into a lower level so that the machine can understand what that code is doing. Then the next step after that is to compile that layer into the .NET framework. And what that means is if you compile it into the .NET framework, other languages such as C#, VB, or all of the other languages that are .NET compliant or compatible will then be able to talk to that code. So there's always two steps of compilation for X++. It's pretty interesting, pretty cool. Hopefully another video I'll go into it in a bit more detail, especially with the advances now. So 2012, there's 2 compilations with AX7, which is the new web-based version. It actually, X++ is a fully .NET compliant language, which is a massive achievement by the Microsoft team. So what we're going to do is we're going to compile this application. So click that. It's going to give us a message. Can potentially take a long time. I think they're underselling themselves here. These compilations can take 3 to 5 hours to 6 hours. Generally, I normally budget 3 hours on a nice Azure server. But sometimes, you know, like they take a long time. So I'm going to say yes. And this thing is going to compile its happy face off for a while. So I'm going to pause this, and then I'm probably going to come back in about 3 hours and then continue with this video. Okay, so we're back after that long wait. And yeah, is your first, I guess, example of Microsoft AX being a bit funky sometimes with installation. So the message window over here, fantastic message window there, nothing in it. Close that. Tells me I've got an error here. I click the error and it has nothing in there, right? So something I forgot to mention, there is actually a new compilation tool called AX Build, which sometimes I use, but generally not from a fresh install. It works pretty well, but it can have a few issues too. So look, this has an error. I mean, normally I can look in the logs just to make sure everything went through. I think it should be, bear with me while I try to find it here. That's not the server. So server will probably be 32-bit, so it's program files, Dynamics AX60, server, Dynamics, and then log. And there's no logs there. Hooray. So we can look in bin, and there should be a file here that gives you some form of information, but it doesn't look like it's there. Yeah, look, because it's a fresh build, I'm pretty confident that once we compile it down, it should be fine. And I mean, it's not giving me an error, right? Let's go in here. Sorry, let's just try in here. Let's compiler. Yeah, let's carry on. I mean, this is the wonderful world of AX. So hopefully it resolves itself. If it doesn't resolve itself, then we can go into a debugging session in a future video. So what we're going to do is we're going to say compile into .NET Framework still. It can take a long time. Again, this shouldn't take as long as the previous compilation. This one should only take, I'd say probably about an hour and a half. But what I'll do is I'll start running it, pause the video, and then we can come back once it's done. Okay, so we're back. So basically, we saw that there was an error in the initial compilation, but if there's an error in that compilation, you won't actually be able to compile into the SIL layer. So if you see this info log that says the full CL generation from X++ is done, you wouldn't be able to get that successful message if there was a compilation error. It just wouldn't compile down to that layer. So we know that that issue has been resolved, which is fantastic. We can close this. We can look at all these wonderful warnings. Now, the reason these are there are predominantly because of payroll. So we don't need to deal with them, and we can carry on to the next step. So activate application functionality and provide license information. So if you recall, in one of the earlier episodes, we downloaded licenses, a text file. There we go. And that was found on MSDN. So we're going to provide that license. If you're an ISV or a vendor, you'll be able to generate your own licenses. Not going to do it in this example, but generally when I set up a system, I wouldn't use this license. I would use a Kudu license, and that means I'd be able to then also develop in the var, cus layer, or any other layer barring the user layer. For now, it's just a demo system. Well, It's just a developer server. So theoretically, we should be always developing in a different layer other than the user layer. But since most of you guys aren't going to have access to generate your own licenses, I thought it'd just be easier to show the standard way. And then once I start getting into developing and start making some models and start doing some of the fun coding stuff, then we'll load my own or CUDA license. You can follow along, figure out how to do that. And then I'll talk about best practices. So pretty much how the layers work. Let's see if we can show you quickly. So AX 2012 has layers. So if you start AX 2012 layers, you'll have an image over here. Let's get a good one just to show you this. That's probably a pretty good one. Okay, yeah. So now you can, I always mention the model store. So the model store is the code, right? So it's the code base. So these are all the layers that Microsoft actually has. You've got your sys layer, your GLS, and all of these wonderful layers. Now what happens is when you compile, it flattens all these layers. So instead of having, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you'll have one layer. But now what happens when the compiler finds a difference between the sys layer and the user layer? It then goes by where it occurs on the tree. So user layer will override everything below it. Same for customer layer. Okay, so very important, therefore, that you put your code in the correct layer. A lot of these issues have kind of been worked through in AX7. Microsoft has quite a cool solution to it. But in AX 2012, you have to be very careful. So what happens is you'll go to customers and you'll see, I don't know, maybe like 100 different models within the model store, and none of them version controlled. This is shocking. I mean, as a consultant, personally, I've just walked away from a contract whereby their code was in such a mess that I refuse to work there. It would mean I'd be there for the next year, literally always fixing almost impossible tasks. So as both a customer, as both a consultant, please, I implore you, put your stuff in the right layer. What I mean by that is if you're a vendor, put your code in the vendor layer. If you're an ISV, put your code in the ISV layer. If you're a customer, put it there. Please, it might be a little bit of administrative burden in the short term, but you're going to ruin your implementation if you don't follow best practices. And then what's going to happen is, even if you employed Bill Gates, your system would still be screwed. So, you know, it's worthwhile to follow these recommendations. Okay, cool. So we're back. So there's some error message here, license value base package. Yeah, don't worry about it. It's no biggie. So there we've got our license. We've got the famous Contoso. All this wonderful stuff is enabled now. Cool. So now we can configure the application functionality. So I think this is a really good idea that Microsoft has done, but it often adds a lot of complexity and people don't use it properly, and then it doesn't actually achieve the function that they were hoping for. So I'm going to leave this as per normal. Normally what I'd actually do though is I'd come in and I'd definitely only choose Australia's country region. So let's do that. Again, this is a bit of a strange one because by being prudent and only ticking what you need sometimes creates compilation issues further down the track. So it's something you just got to be aware of. It's a great idea, tying in code to country specific features or even license specific features, but it does sometimes cause some funnies. So I'm gonna leave that. I just want to make sure project I got all the advanced features. I'm not going to integrate with our CRM, so that's grand. I've got project 1 and project 2. Retail, I don't want any retail, so that's cool. I'll take all of that off. And then there's an old warehouse management 2, which has been superseded by WMS, or Microsoft bought, like, I don't know what they're called, Blue something, pretty cool. So they did all the advanced warehousing. So that if you use a 1, you can't use warehouse management 2. So since this has been deprecated, I always just take it off. And I think the one that it's replaced it is I'm not going to go into you'll find it somewhere. But yeah, this is just the setup I like using. Use it, don't use it, really your call. Personal actions I like to keep off because that's a pain in the ass. Otherwise I think we're good for now. Yeah, play around, do some research, but you're more than happy just using the standard function set, and you should be completely fine. So I'm going to go okay. Yeah, and it changes a whole bunch of stuff, you see, so it's going to have to change all these tables and fields in order. But again, don't worry too much about this. If this is your first time installed, just use the standards. If you've installed AX a few times, you probably already know what license kind of you're happy with and what suits you. Again, if you want any questions or anything, hit me up on Twitter. Comment in the comments. Yeah, more than happy to help. Okay, cool. So that's going to take a fair bit of time. So what happens with all of these license keys? These license keys are tied into tables, right? So let's say, for example, as we've done, we've turned off the country features. So what that's done now is there might be a table called assets Brazil, right? And what that means is Brazil has some form of regulatory requirement that within the country of Brazil, you have to treat assets a certain way. So let's say Brazil says that their country says anytime you order a laptop, you got to give $10 to a charity, which would be a great rule for any country to have, but let's say that's the rule. Now that rule is only applicable in Brazil. So now every time AX you want to then add an asset, you need to make sure that the $10 is going to the charity. So then what you do is you'd design that form of code, and what you do is you tie it into a country payroll code, a country license configuration code. But now, since I'm in Australia, they don't have that rule, right? So I don't need that code or those tables, so I turn it off. And that's kind of how licensing configuration works. So, cool. We're good to go. Yeah, grand. Now we're going to configure our data, modify data types. I mean, you can do this. I mean, I always stick to the standards. Although some customers try to change some of the stuff. My opinion, subjective, it's more harm than good. Just stick to the standards, change your business process, and you tend to be happier. So I'm just going to accept that. Now it's going to just go through its wonderful little processing. Okay, and now the next step that we're about to move on to, it's the Synchronize Database step. So what happens is, I mean, I've mentioned numerous times, is all of the tables, all of our transactional data, master data resides in one database, and all of our code resides in the other. So what that means is when you develop for AX, you're designing all of these tables, but they haven't been pushed through to the database yet. So what this is doing, the Synchronized Database, is it's synchronizing all of your coding changes, any changes you've made to structure of tables, add in new fields, all of that stuff. And then it's synchronizing it with SQL to make sure that they're in sync. So we're going to click that. It's going to do its wonderful synchronization. And I'm going to pause again because this generally takes, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, so I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, so the synchronization's happened and we've got a few warning signs, and this is really just to do with all those retail that are turned off. I don't really care about retail. This box will never be used for retail, so I don't care about those errors, so I'm just going to close. Now I'm going to create partitions. So partitions in AX 2012 is a new concept. It wasn't around in 2009 that I'm aware of. So what partitions allow you to do is, let's say for example you want to run two systems on the same code base but have them completely isolated, so never be able to access any information or share any tables or anything like that. You'd use a partition. So this is particularly useful in government or public sector implementations. but doesn't really affect us for this implementation. So I'm just going to use it as standard. Configure accounts and profiles. So I'm going to initialize user profiles. So what these user profiles are is this allows you to kind of like set up pages for them, right? So a user profile will then mean that these people will see certain things. You can then design role centers for them, all sorts of stuff. So I'm just going to stay with the standard. I'm not too bothered about that. And then application integration framework. So this is, I mean, for all of the wordiness of the name, this can be summarized as really Microsoft's platform or service that will allow AX to talk and integrate with external applications. So application integration framework is commonly abbreviated to AIF. It was a big part of 2012. I haven't personally seen that many people implement it. Well, at least. A lot of people use it for for file drops. So they'll drop a file in a location, then AIF will pick up that file, that XML, and put it through into AX. So the way it does that is, it's really cool actually, because what it does is it does all your business validation. So let's say, we'll go back to the example of the Brazilian, anytime you buy a computer, you got to give $10 to charity. So what will that happen is, let's say I've got a file of 20 computers that I've bought now for the company. It's in an Excel file. Now I want to import all of those assets into the company. So in a traditional system, I would then import the file, right? But what would happen is, for all 10 of those assets, that $10 wouldn't have been published or processed in the correct manner. The assets would have been loaded, but none of the business logic would have been achieved. So what the AIF does, it says, okay, cool, we're going to take these 10 computers, but then every time we load a computer into the system, we're going to validate against our business logic. So it's going to take in those assets and it's going to say, hang on, we're in Brazil, these assets belong to Brazil, we need to, for every asset, create an invoice or a cash book transaction that pays this charity $10. So that way, you know, when you're doing that import, not only is the data getting imported, but all the applicable business logic that applies to it is also being done. So it's a really good way. It's a really nice framework. Works really well. Like I said, not many people I've seen have implemented it correctly or even really functioning, to be fair. And then you got the further complication that AIF is deprecated in AX7, and the reason why it's deprecated is because that AX7 doesn't play very nicely with the AIF. So what they've done, again, I mean, AX7 is pretty new and I haven't played with it that much, but I think what they've done then is they've expanded the data import export framework to then deploy via RESTful services, which is a fantastic idea. Again, I wish I'd played with it more, and I'd really like to do a future series on it, because I think one of the big downers for me about AX 2012 was not having a RESTful web service way to expose application logic and data. So I really think that's a smart move on Microsoft's behalf. It's a bit unfortunate for those people that have invested significant time and effort in AIF. I did read somewhere that custom AIF services will be upgradable into AX7, but that's pretty much it. The long-term strategy is definitely to move away from it. So yeah, I guess we've got a few minutes to talk while we wait for this to finish. So what this is doing is, let's talk about data import export framework, right? So we got our system now. So pretty much we've got our system. The next few episodes I'm going to be talking about installing Enterprise Portal, Visual Studio, data import export framework, all those extra kind of add-ons to the system. So the next step for me would be really, and in the next episode, what I'll be focusing on is Enterprise Portal. So what Enterprise Portal is really, it's Microsoft's attempt to give users a web-based platform in order to achieve AX functionality. So let's say, for example, I wanted to place a purchase order. Instead of now everyone in the organization having to have a physical machine set up, AX 2012 installed on it, go into the system, a license assigned to them, and then create a purchase order. Microsoft just said, okay, cool, we understand that some people are on the go, some people don't have machines capable enough to install client software, so let's create a web-based platform that these people can perform certain of these functionalities. So what then would happen is this mythical user would then log into a browser, they'd log in with their organizational credentials and be able to place a purchase order via the enterprise portal. So like I mentioned, enterprise portal is underpinned by SharePoint 2013. Love it or hate it, personally I hate SharePoint. Put the cards on the table. Like Microsoft's got some great tools. SharePoint for me is clunky. I've never seen a good implementation at a corporate or an organization whereby it actually added much value or increased productivity. Generally it's okay. I'll stop being a complete down on SharePoint, but that's the tool. That's what Microsoft uses. And then data import export framework is quite a good one. So data import export framework, this is used to get data into the system. So anytime you do an installation of AX, it's generally for either a fresh implementation of AX, or otherwise it's for an upgrade, or otherwise you're going to do some development work. All of those scenarios, you need data in the system. So all of those scenarios, I mean, if you're doing development, you need data so you can test, So if I'm putting assets in, is the vendor getting the $10? So that's data. You need data to test that logic and that development. Same with a new implementation. You need the data of the company to transfer that data from their old ERP systems into AX. So cool. That's all done. We've got a lovely tick box, and then we can say configure system accounts. I'm not going to do this now. I've set this up, but again, we don't need it for now. So we're good to go. So if we actually close that now, to make configure certain changes must be configured. Okay, I'm just going to synchronize it just so that it doesn't shout at me later. And then once this ends, I'm going to then, I'll basically then open it, and we can see we'll have a fresh working version of AX 2012. Okay, so I think that is finished now. We're going to have to click continue for it to do its next wonderful synchronization. So generally what will happen is every time you synchronize, there'll be 2 steps. Okay, so we should be good to go now, hopefully. Yeah, let's just get out of that. Yeah. Let's close this. Okay, and now I'm just going to open the client just to make sure that everything that we've got a functioning system, really. Okay, so still got to do this. Workflow execution account. We could create a new one. I'm not going to at this stage. Create reference data. Again, this video is a bit long. I might split it down into 2 videos at a later point, but yeah, for now it's going to be one. Okay, we're going to create the legal entities. So what happens is Dynamics AX always creates the data account. Please do not use this as a legal entity. Create your own. So I'm going to create a few here. I'm going to create Kudu Cloud. I'm going to call this Kudu, and I'm going to choose this as being in Australia. There we go. Normally I'd fill in a whole bunch of other stuff here, but we'll do that in a different video. And then I'm going to also add one here. So Murder Productions, call this Murd. This is also in Australia. And there we go. Okay, so we created 2 companies. We're going to set up the system parameters. We're going to say that the system language is English Australia. The rest of we're good with, and we're going to import data, which we're not actually going to do, so we're just going to mark that as complete. So now if we close this and reopen it, we should have a fully functioning AX system. I'm going to say I don't want to join that customer experience program. And now you can see, look again, sorry for the high DPI, but I'm going to push Control D. And if you see, that's kind of fixed up the text on the right box, but the left box is always funky. But if I push Control D, it opens up the AOT. So cool, that opens up well. I'm happy with that. If I then go Windows and go New Workspace, my text is correct. Okay, so we're happy. We know that AX is working, and we know that the AOT and MorphX is working. So literally, we now have a fully functioning AX 2012 system. So if you made it this far along and you've managed to follow successfully, well done. A lot of people struggle to get this far, so yeah, you've done well. And now we'll start going into some of the more advanced topics. So until next time.